Welcome to the Vegan Transformation Book Club, Episode 4. If you are joining me live, I'd love for you to share in the chat a quick hello. If you're new to the Vegan Transformation Book Club, also share where you're joining from. I'd love to hear. So we're going to be diving into Chapter 4 today of the Vegan Transformation. Last week, we were on Chapter 3, which was the healing power of compassion and empathy, and also how we could hold empathy in more empowered ways and more sustainable ways. You can always go back and catch the replay on that if you missed it. Today, though, we're diving into the power of finding deeper meaning and purpose and ways that moving on the vegan journey can help with that. So let's dive in. And as I'm going on, if you have comments or questions, please feel free to share them in the chat, whether you are watching live or whether you catch the replay. I'd love to hear from you. Oh, great to see you, Joe. Thanks for joining and for being here last month too. It's great to see you. And we got to connect at Vegan Summerfest, which was really awesome. Those of you that haven't been to Vegan Summerfest, it's a wonderful experience with lots of great learning and support and food. And I was able to share copies of the Vegan Transformation there at Vegan Summerfest as well. It was a wonderful experience to see lots of friends on the vegan journey. So as we get started, if you've been reading the book, I'd love to hear how some of these ideas have been landing for you as we dive into them. So look forward to hearing. And great to see Lynn and also Animal Listener Books from Northern Michigan. Great to see you guys. Thanks for joining. So I'd like to talk today about the power of meaning and purpose, how healing it is to connect with our purpose, how veganism relates to this, and some of the different ways that people express their purpose on that vegan plant-based path. I'll share some guided exercises as well as share a story that relates to this path of finding our purpose, and also just some resources you can draw on. One quote that I shared in the book that I think is really, really meaningful is from Albert Schweitzer, who did become vegan later in his life. He was always an advocate for nonviolent ways of living, and later realized he needed to include, non-human animals in that circle of compassion. And he stated that the purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others. So just something for us to really think about. And you might be thinking about the ways that you yearn to help others, or maybe already are through the choices you're making right now. And one thing I was struck with when I was doing the research for my book is how important meaning and purpose are for our well-being and our humanity. Some of you might have read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that's a deeply impactful book that I took far too long to actually get around to reading. I think I was a little anxious that, because I knew the topic related to World War II and the concentration camps. But I found that what he shared in the book, Man's Search for Meaning, about the centrality of meaning and purpose for us as humans, and how those of us who have been searching for meaning and find meaning, we can thrive better whatever the circumstances we're in, no matter how challenging they might be. And so what is meaning? It's really about this sense that our life has significance, value, coherence, and purpose. And what is purpose? It's more specific. It's about having a direction in life, a sense of mission, intentions, and goals that motivate us. And research finds that those of us who have a greater sense of meaning and purpose are more likely to have improved life satisfaction, we live longer, and have greater emotional and physical well-being. So it seems to be really, really central to human thriving. And for those of you that know about the blue zones, they're geographic regions throughout the world where people live longer and more healthful, active lives, long into, you know, their senior years. And the blue zones have certain core attributes that seem to contribute to why they have these longer, healthier, more active lives. And one of them is a plant predominant diet, centered around whole plant foods that are fresh and grown, local to their region. But in addition, there's other factors like, being very active and physically active lifestyles and having a sense of community. But one feature that is very common to the blue zones as well is a sense of purpose. It's just an intrinsic part of their life. So there's this term, ikigai, if I'm pronouncing it right, that is a Japanese term that describes purpose as a sense of giving this reason for getting up each day, a reason for waking up in the morning that just drives us to be motivated and contribute in some way, whether big or small. So an interesting thing that came up when I was doing my surveys for my book, The Vegan Transformation, I had sent out an online survey that about 350 vegans completed. And I asked about the positive changes in their life emotionally, socially, and spiritually as part of their vegan journey. And one of the biggest positives that a majority reported, 75%, was this sense of greater meaning and purpose since they had gone on the vegan path. And so it led me to wonder, well, why does a vegan lifestyle so often contribute to a sense of purpose or a drive to serve? And I'll just ask you that, those of you that are here live or watching later, if you are either vegan or you're moving in that direction of being more plant-based, have you found a greater sense of purpose or meaning through this choice to eat plant-based, buy products that are the least, cause the least harm, that sort of thing, are more sustainable? Has that brought you any difference in your sense of meaning and purpose? Do feel free to share in the chat. I do know that some of you that are here that it has. I have at least one fellow author joining me here, Animal Listeners Books, who wrote the book Animal Listeners, which is a great book, by the way, about, it's a fiction book that is really intriguing. I won't even give it away, but so I know some of you here also feel this sense of purpose too. And I, feel free to share ways that you found that as we're going through this talk today. In talking to different vegans and my own journey, which I'll share a little bit more shortly on that, but for many of us, there's some sort of healing experience, awakening experience, or transformational experience that we have on this vegan path that inspires us to want to help others and to create positive change in our world. So you might be thinking about, have you had changes in your life as you've moved in the direction of plant-based or vegan, whether it be in your health, your emotional well-being, your spiritual awakening or connection, or just your connection with nature, with other people, other beings? How has your life changed? And Animal Listeners Books shares, absolutely, that's what motivates me to write my novels, hoping to inspire kindness to animals. That's beautiful. I think in addition to our own healing experience, one thing that I found in my own life, and maybe you can relate to this as well, is we start on veganism or towards that path of more plant-based for different reasons. For me, it was ethics and realizing first the situation for workers in many slaughterhouses and factory farms. And then that really quickly led me to realize what was happening to animals and to want to do things differently in my own life to cause the least harm possible through my choices. And then over time, I learned about the health and the environment, and all of it came together as things I care about deeply. So I love this quote that is in the book Food is Climate by Glenn Mercer. It's a quote by Philip Wolin, who wrote the foreword. He says, "Veganism is the Swiss Army knife of the future. One instrument solves our ethical, economic, environmental, water, health, and sustainability problems and ends animal cruelty forever." And so I really resonated with that quote because it points to how this one choice in, most of all our food choices, but also other choices as well, other purchases we make, other things we buy, from cosmetics to household products and all of that. But I think because food is the choice we make every day, it's the one that hits home the most. How making compassionate plant-based choices can really make a difference for so many of the big issues of our time. It's sort of a win-win-win for all these different things. However, as we're thinking about ways that we might serve, we don't all fit into one box, and we aren't all called to serve in the same exact ways. And along that same line of thinking, we enter the vegan path on, through different doors. For, some of us, as mentioned, it could be the compassion for animals. There's others, it might be this concern about sustainability and environmental care. And others of us, it might be our health journeys that lead us on this path. And so when we're thinking of our own ways that we can have a positive influence, as well as the different ways we can support and empower others, it's important to remember people, relate to different things and come into this path for different reasons, even if we come to realize all of them are interconnected and matter. So just to share a little bit about my own journey. My background is as a clinical psychologist, for many years working one-on-one with clients to help with healing and addressing emotional and other issues they were dealing with, also physical health issues in some cases, anxiety, trauma. And when I became vegetarian and then vegan, I came to all these realizations that I hadn't anticipated. I, before becoming vegan, had never seen myself really changing my diet in this way, for sure. I think that was my biggest block, is I couldn't see how I could eat differently because I found eating and cooking challenging to begin with. So I just couldn't imagine what would someone who is plant-based or vegan eat. And that was always a block to me from going further with it. But when I ate at this one conference center that had plant-based food and discovered it was delicious, I think that planted a seed. So that then later, when I saw the program that I saw that opened my eyes to factory farming and animal agriculture and its harms to workers, and then very quickly realized the harms to animals, it just led me on this whole path. And it opened up so many doors for me. I mean, I was blessed to be pretty physically healthy at the time, but as I've been now plant-based for going on 20 years, I've maintained good health through that, that I can really attribute to my healthier choices, because I was not on a good path with what I was eating before. But even more than that, it opened up things emotionally and spiritually for me, where I think I found greater peace and fulfillment through making choices that really were true to my values. As one of the people that I interviewed for the book said, it was like a weight lifted off of them, a weight they didn't even know was there until it was lifted. And I think I experienced that too, that choosing to eat plant-based, once I realized that this was an option I could thrive with and that really honored my values, gave me such meaning and purpose. And it led me to shift my work in some ways. For several years, I continued as a therapist, but one of the things that I did in the last few years was to research and write this book that this book club is based on. And, even though I'd always been introverted and very kind of reserved and private, there was something about going vegan that led me to want to speak out more in ways that I couldn't have seen before. And I don't identify as an activist in the traditional way. I so deeply admire activists that are out there in the ways that we usually think of activism, maybe protesting or speaking out or raising awareness. But that's not my personality. And so I've had to find my own path. And I've realized that for me personally, I'm more of a teacher and a healer and maybe a writer. And so those things have been more of how I've shared my passion about the vegan lifestyle through my book and through teaching and coaching and speaking. I've also found that even though I was not a cook before, I actually do enjoy cooking now that I'm vegan, and I love bringing great vegan food to events. And it's just a way to show people like what I discovered, that it actually can taste really delicious and be so much more varied and flavorful and abundant and colorful than you ever would have imagined. So, as others of you are here thinking about, what are your passions and what are the ways that maybe you have shared the wonder of plant-based eating and the vegan lifestyle with people around you, in your own unique ways. Now, when I was doing the research for my book, surveys and interviews, people shared different ways that they were expressing a sense of purpose. And there were so many different ways that people were expressing their passion for plant-based or vegan living. And so in the back of my book, there's an appendix that shares all the different ways that people had said that they were sharing their gifts or serving their purpose. Some of them were through volunteer activities, and others were paid work and with an organization, and others were perhaps volunteer, and others were maybe creating their own business. Or just things that they did within their own existing work to bring more awareness. So this slide kind of cut off some of the things that I had on here, but just to kind of highlight, there was different ways of animal advocacy that people were doing, from whether it be actually doing things like protests or being part of an animal advocacy organization, to writing blogs or articles or social media posts. There were people who were sharing it more through the fitness and health perspective, whether as coaches or plant-based athletes or writing or teaching. There were people that, expressed it through food, cooking classes, recipe blogs, restaurants, catering, just bringing great food or providing great vegan food for friends, family, or at events. People that came through the environment and climate space and wanted to share awareness there. And so many other ways, it just was really kind of endless, the ways that people brought their specific gifts and expertise and interests to share the vegan message. And it didn't always mean stopping what they were already doing. It sometimes just meant bringing this into that in some way. So I'm going to invite you to think about a few reflection questions. Now, these questions are also in the book. If you have a copy of the Vegan Transformation, there's also additional questions in the book beyond the ones I'm sharing here, but I'm sharing just a few of them to get you thinking. And you may already feel like you have a good sense of purpose, or you might be really exploring ways that you can share things that matter to you and have a bigger impact. And for me, it's always evolving, because I might be serving my purpose in one way, but then find additional things that are part of that over time as I grow and change and learn. So you might be thinking about, what are the problems I most want to solve? Even within the vegan space, there are different things that each of us might really care about more. Just as I shared on the last slide, some of us are really into food and want to share the, different ways of vegan cooking and eating. Others of us are more into maybe education or advocacy for animals. There's so many different ways. So just think about, what is it that most matters to me? Like, if I had a magic wand and I could fix one thing in the world, what would that be? Or what are the things that just kind of are on my mind and I find myself thinking about, or, just kind of have a hard time letting go of? And so you're really looking at it in three different categories: the problems that you really care about and want to make a positive impact for, the things you love to do, because it's really important that you actually choose things you enjoy, because that gives you sustainability. And so looking at the activities that you really already love to do and how those could relate. And then what are you good at? Because most of us have certain things that we're skilled at or maybe have built expertise in. And then you might also have experiences that have impacted your life. Like if you healed through your plant-based or vegan lifestyle, that's going to have a big impact to help others in a way that, maybe someone else might not have that same impact. So you can always come back to these slides later on, because this replay will be up on my YouTube channel, or feel free to take a screenshot or check out the book. So I invite you to reflect on these. And if there's anything that comes up for you as you're thinking about them, do feel free to throw it in the chat or the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And so as you reflect on, okay, what do I love to do? What do I care about helping? What are my gifts? Then pull those together to think about how you can bring your gifts to serve or advocate, whether it's on behalf of humans, animals, the environment, all of the above. And you might also just reflect on how are you already serving? Chances are there's already things you're doing. Maybe it's just a matter of continuing what you're doing that's already working, or building on it or refining it. But if you're not quite feeling as fulfilled as you'd like there, reflect on some of the other questions. How could my gifts and skills be brought forward, whether to work with an existing organization or to share on social media or to write a blog, any of those things. Where is there a gap where my gifts or experience could help? And I think it's also really helpful to start where you are right now. Like if you already have a job that pays your bills, or you already have different communities that you're part of, those could be places where you're sharing vegan food or vegan messages or products. For example, a hairstylist might, use cruelty-free products, in their salon or that sort of thing. Or you might advocate for there being a plant-based or vegan option at a work gathering, things like that. Those are all ways of raising awareness for people, because even those around us who are not maybe interested right now in changing, just to even be exposed to more delicious plant-based food plants those seeds that you never know when someone might be more open when they have a health crisis or something else happens, that then, hey, I want to know more. So I'm going to do a brief meditation with you here called the Wise Advisor Meditation. So let yourself get comfortable. This is just a few minutes, but it's a way to go inward and maybe reflect on the questions I was just asking on a deeper level. So I invite you to just join in right now with me for the Wise Advisor meditation. So this meditation, I also do share it in the book, and it's also in my website as well. I'll put the link in the description below this episode for the meditations as well, so that you could listen to it again sometime if you like, or download the audio recording. But this Wise Advisor meditation, it takes us beyond the limits of what we know with our rational brain, where we can sometimes just rule out options and not be very open to possibility. And so when we go a little deeper, we can connect with our own inner wisdom. And this visualization helps you to connect with your greater creativity and possibility. So I invite you to keep an open mind and see what unfolds. So start by taking 3 slow, deep breaths just to quiet your mind and body, and just shift from whatever's been going on before you join me here to let yourself be fully present in this moment. And after taking those slow, deep breaths, imagine yourself in a peaceful and beautiful place. This could be a place in nature, or it could be indoors in a favorite room or building. It could be somewhere you've been before, a favorite spot that you love, or it could be somewhere you create in your own imagination, whether a garden, the ocean, a forest, a lake or a stream or a park or a meadow. Just let yourself imagine this space and picture it with all of your senses, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feelings. And once you're comfortable there, invite your wise inner advisor to join you. And just allow an image to form that represents your inner guide. This is a wise and kind figure who knows you well and wants your greatest good. Let your advisor appear in any form that it shows up. It might be a woman or a man, an animal, someone you know, a spiritual figure, a character from a movie or book, or your own wise self or higher self. Just invite your wise advisor to join you in whatever way it shows up. And you might ask your advisor's name, and then ask any questions you have regarding your purpose or serving with your gifts. For example, you might ask, how do I serve my purpose in a way that's just truly meaningful and impactful? Or what are some steps I can take to be even more aligned with bringing my gifts and serving my purpose? And just ask one question at a time. And after you ask a question, pause to listen to your advisor's response. You may hear your advisor speaking with you, or you might just feel more of a felt sense or a symbolic representation of his or her message. Allow the communication to flow in whatever way feels most natural. Now you can come back and listen to this recording later and pause it and spend more time with this exercise. I'll give just a moment now for you to take in any feedback that you're receiving now, and just know you can return to this at any time or go to the link in the description to listen again later. But take a moment to just take in whatever you're receiving right now in response to your questions about a step forward towards greater alignment with your purpose, your contribution, and your gifts. And for now, I'm going to invite you to bring closure to the conversation and thank your advisor, and perhaps agree to meet up again to spend a little more time with this. As you part, your advisor might have a final message or gift to give you. Allow yourself to receive this. And then just say goodbye. And perhaps let's meet again and let the peaceful place fade away for now. And come back to the present, back to the room where you're seated. Now, sometimes you might find that things come up when you're doing this practice right in the midst of it. And sometimes you might find that things come up for you later. Sometimes I find when I do a visualization, I don't always have the insights in the moment, but later when I'm going about my business, doing a walk, taking a walk, or washing the dishes, or doing some mindless activity, these insights come up of things I want to do or things that feel aligned for me. So if anything came up for you from the conversation or anything comes up for you later, you want to maybe write those down and explore, are there any actions that I want to take based on this? And what would I feel like and what would my life be like if I actually followed these suggestions or these insights? I want to share a little bit about one of the stories from the book, Jackie's story. Jackie was one of the people I interviewed for my book, and she was so inspiring. Her story is at the end of chapter 4, and she had a son that died at a young age from a negative effect from medications, some sort of reaction that he had to the medication. And so losing this child so early got her thinking about the health of herself and her family in a new way. And she still had two other sons. And so she went on this whole journey of exploring ways to be healthier that led her to the movie Forks Over Knives. And when she saw Forks Over Knives, she realized like she had not been told the truth about health and food and what she could actually do to help herself and her family be healthier. So this led her on a whole path to bring her family on a plant-based diet. As a family, they all lost a lot of weight because they'd all been struggling with overweight and some different medical conditions, which all improved on the plant-based vegan diet. And over time, she just discovered all the reasons for being plant-based or vegan, and being a person that was very much against oppression. Realization about animals really hit home for her as well. And she ultimately shifted her work into helping other people in her community, especially those who are underserved, connect with different lifestyle practices that, including a plant-based diet, that could help them have more health empowerment. And so her life changed, and she has impacted so many other people through her own healing journey and then sharing it with others. It's just a beautiful sharing of how this can unfold. And there's so many other stories within the book of people whose lives just really changed, and they went from someone maybe living kind of a more quiet, private life to someone who was sharing their gifts in ways they had never anticipated. And some people, still living a pretty private life, but helping their loved ones around them through being a healthy role model. So many different ways, and so inspiring, because I think we all, want to live meaningful lives and make a positive difference. And there's something about going on this path and realizing how choices we make can make a huge difference for us and for others and for the things we care about. And that is just deeply meaningful. So one of the things I share in the book is this idea that we are all part of a larger whole. I think of us as sort of like cells in the body of a larger body. So I feel like I'm a heart cell. And so I'm not the same as someone else who might feel like they're a cell in another part of the larger body of humanity. And we each have different gifts, and so different skills, different ways to contribute. We each have a part to play, and mine's not the same as yours. And, each of us here watching live, watching later, we each have different parts to play in contributing to a more peaceful, healthy, compassionate world. And so we each have our own part. We can't do it all. I don't have control over everything, nor do you. And I can't do it alone, nor can you. We're all, working together and each serving with our gifts. And I think it's a reminder not to dismiss someone else's way of contributing as wrong because it's different than yours, and vice versa. To not think you need to be like anybody else because you have your own unique way of living and being and contributing. So to go deeper with this, if you haven't read the book, this is where you can find it at almost any bookstore, online or maybe even local. And on my website, I have a book tab where you can find, different booksellers that you can purchase it from in audiobook, ebook, or paperback. And also, just if you want some immediate resources that are free for just thriving emotionally on your vegan journey, I do have the Vegan Emotional Resilience Toolkit. You can either use this QR code to scan it to get to the link, or I do share it in the description below. So I want to thank you all for joining me today for the Vegan Transformation Book Club. I'd love to hear any takeaways that you are taking away from this conversation. Please do feel free to share in the comment or chat. And just, I want to say I guess 3 points that you can take away from the overall picture here is, first of all, that having a sense of purpose is deeply meaningful and deeply important to having a fulfilling life. Vegan living can create a sense of purpose for us because through making choices that are compassionate, even when they're challenging sometimes, that can give us a sense that we are making a positive difference. And we each have our own unique purpose. You're not like anybody else. You have your own unique way of contributing. Joe shares Jackie's story is wonderful and inspiring, and viewing the Seeds to Inspire Foundation's website is quite an awesome organization. Yes, that is Jackie's foundation, Seeds to Inspire. I'll share the link to that in the description as well. Super uplifting to see different ways people make a difference. Thanks for sharing that, Joe. Any other takeaways that you want to share? Please feel free to throw them in. We have another minute or so here. Yes, we are all cells in the larger whole. Yes. So next month's topic is authentic fulfillment, which that was a big chapter to write because it really captures the complexity of how do we live lives that are emotionally and mentally healthy, and how can vegan and plant-based living help with that? And then how do we navigate also the challenges too that sometimes can come up for us as we dare to honor our values and live sometimes differently than maybe others around us. So definitely be checking out chapter 5 in preparation for next month. And let me just share that next month is going to be on Wednesday, August 26th. Now, I have a conflict earlier in the afternoon that day. So this is the one time I'm going to be doing it later at 4 o'clock, Wednesday, August 26th. So I'll, post the link for this again as we get a couple weeks out from the time, but just to know it'll be Wednesday, August 26th at 4 o'clock. So thanks for joining me for the Vegan Transformation Book Club. I really appreciate each and every one of you and your support, and do stay in touch. Keep me posted on how things are going, and let me know how the different concepts land for you and maybe how you're applying them in your own life. I'd love to hear. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. See you next month.